Welcome to Whispers from Hell, where untold horrors and chilling mysteries await your discovery. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss a single whisper from the darkness. Are you ready? Because once you step in, there's no turning back. Morris Media and I usually don't say anything at the start of these compilations, but hit me up for the next 15 seconds. Most of you aren't getting my notifications anymore. Can you please check if you're still subbed? YouTube has been turning it off for a bunch of people, so you might want to check them. All right, then back to the spooks. Have a good night. I'm a security guard and work graveyard shift for a federal contractor in an office building in the Washington, D.C. area, and have been at this site for about 2 months. The building is very secure. You need to get a key card in order to get in, as well as to move around the building. Well, today, when I show up to work, the guard I'm relieving tells me that he got a prank call, SL death threat over the phone. I told him to shut up and go home, that he was serious and had a report written up and everything. So the other guard tells me that he got a call around 7:20 from someone saying they were in the building in a weird scream voice. He just hung up on them, but they call back a few minutes later and do the same thing, saying, "Come find me, I'm on the 7th floor," and that they would cut him and do all kinds of stuff in that same weird voice. Well, we have to do our hourly patrols between 6 o'clock p.m. and 6 o'clock a.m., but he didn't do any of his because he was too freaked out, and I don't blame him. So I asked him if he didn't mind staying a little longer to do the patrol with me. We do the whole thing pretty thoroughly and don't see anything, so he goes home. It's now 11:15 p.m. I'm sitting at the desk after completing my second patrol and am a little freaked out myself. That's when I get a phone call. Immediately, I start freaking out because it's from a restricted number, and the only people that dial this number are our main office and people from the company we contract for. I pick up the phone, and this strange sort of wheezing voice starts saying, "What floor are you on? My hands are shaking and I'm basically freezing and don't move or say anything." After asking me the same questions several more times, they hang up and I call my supervisor, the building security manager, and are dispatched. The weirdest part is that the person obviously has knowledge of the building, because they called right when I finished my patrol asking what floor I was on, and they told the other guard they were on the 7th, the top floor, even though I know there's a high chance this is just a prank call from one of our old guards. There's still a slight chance that there's an actual insane person in the building, and I have never been so scared in all my life as to when I heard that voice that night. Managed to be one of the longest in my life, but it got weirder after about 6 hours had passed. Nothing had happened, and I started to feel pretty normal, not 100%, but not carding in fear either. I heard a noise at the front door of the lobby. The lobby is shaped like a triangle with a front desk and guard station at the base of the triangle, and the whole right side is a big window with the front doors at the far end of that side. I instantly turn off the speakers to the computer and freeze. I don't move for about a minute and roll my chair over to the camera monitors. The display has 9 camera feeds and switches to the other 9 camera feeds every few seconds, so I'm frantically trying to find the ones that correspond to the front door. Now, there are some employees that start showing up between 5 and 6, but they all have key cards, so they come up from the garage through the elevator, and no one has ever tried to do this during the graveyard shift. After what I felt like was an eternity, but was probably only 25 seconds, I find the feed and click on it to maximize, and standing in front of the door facing towards the camera, not into the building, is the figure. He's in a black suit and has a features his face. I crap you not, my jaw drops and my heart races to the thoughts of Slender Man. I immediately call my supervisor and tell him there's someone outside the building just standing there. He says he's 10 minutes out and he'll pull up in front of the building after an agonizing 10 minutes of staring at the feed and this guy not going anywhere. My supervisor finally calls me back and tells me to go to the front doors as he'll lock up in case anything gets crazy. Turns out the guy outside was our new guard that no one told us was coming. I didn't know if I wanted to hug the guy or punch him, but I was glad that one of the weirdest nights of my life was finally over. First off, let me say that I don't hate my mother. I don't love her, but I certainly don't hate her either. My mother is what I can best describe as a lost soul, a person with no purpose, no loyalty, no dedication or consideration for her well-being or the well-being of others. She always puts her habits and addictions before anything or anyone else, and sadly, I don't think that will ever change. During my childhood, I didn't go to school very often. In fact, I hardly ever went, and it got so bad I really fell far behind my classmates, only catching up with my peers when I went to college, something my mom just patronized me about and called me a waste of time, for she never was the most supportive or kindest of people. But anyway, on to the story. When I was around 9, my mom's habit started to get really bad. It all started when she met this man, Chris. He was stocky, just above average height, and gray hair and a gray beard despite being only in his early 40s. Let me give you a mental image of Chris. This guy was hard spoken and always stared at me and my siblings intent, but it wasn't a kind of concern watching of a parent guardian being vigilant. It was an icy, cold, piercing kind of look that petrified us and sent shivers down our spines. It seemed like he hated us, which I remember thinking was strange at the time, because all I ever did was be polite and obedient in fear of what he may do. My mom started having Chris over more and more, always forcing up stairs and out of the way if we dared venturing downstairs for even basic essentials like food or water. We'd be thrown, and that's no exaggeration. She would take us by the arms and fling us full force back into our rooms and lock the door, which she had put a lock on from the outside. For some reason, it is only now, looking back at this period of my life, that I realized just how messed up that actually was she. And Chris would party for days at a time, and I really do mean days. They would simply force us in our room and lock us in as if it was some kind of prison. And in truth, that is what it felt like to us. A prison. We had no food, no water. We had nothing. By the time Chris had finally left, or had just passed out completely, my mother would finally release us, and we would finally get to eat. Not that there was ever much to eat, but we always said at least water and potatoes is better than starving. Anything is better than dying. And yes, you did hear me correctly, potatoes. There was no bread, no milk, no cheese to have on them, not even the sliced variety. We just had these gruesome looking potatoes. Sometimes we even had to scrape off various molds and funguses growing on them. It was vile, but we had to survive. We all knew well more than hope that one day things would be better. This would go on and on for weeks and weeks. It got so bad we actually started to hoard any food we can get our hungry hands on and stash it in our rooms. You see, our mom would occasionally go shopping, not often, and she wouldn't get. Very much when she did, well, not for us anyway. Her groceries usually consisted of beer, vodka, many packets of cigarettes, along with the usual rolling papers, tobacco, and tin foil. Make of that what you will, but the point being she would blow her benefit money intended for us on herself, and of course on Chris. So on the rare occasion she purchased any edible items, it'd be cheap, smart priced lemonade, a packet of crisps, or chocolate bars and biscuits. We would be elated and cherish each bite. We wouldn't eat at all, though, although we did at first. We soon learned to be smarter, and as silly as it sounds, rationing it between us for the 2 to 3 days. We would be locked in the room, and no, we didn't have a bathroom in there. Let's just say there were a lot of warm bottles laid around the room, and the bathroom was one busy place when we finally got out. But in truth, the less said about that, the better. She and Chris would often order out, but of course would never give us anything that they ate. We were literally starving, luckily. For us, there was one place, Ashes, who knew of our situation. Well, I'm guessing they did, and I guess they felt sorry for us, because one day they made us an offer we couldn't believe nor refuse. It all started when me and my 2 brothers snuck out while my mother was passed out, and Chris wasn't around, and as embarrassing as it was, we all mutually decided that we didn't have any other choice but to ask. So I reluctantly asked the man working there if me and my brothers could please have a little food, and when we could, we promised we'd pay him back. He looked at us in disbelief and just said he's really sorry and that he wished he could, but as he only worked there, we looked back and meekly just said okay, and that we understood. Looking back, we must have seemed so pathetic, so discouraged, but not at all surprised. We started to leave. As we were just about to leave, the manager called us back, and after, I presume, hearing our conversation, he stated that every night, if there was anything left, and if we were prepared to come back just before midnight when they closed, we could have whatever was left, instead of it going in the trash, into waste. I know this probably sounds pathetic to some of you, but to us, we couldn't believe our luck. We were just thankful and grateful to this man. As over the top as it might sound, I genuinely believe this man saved our lives on the nights we could sneak out and go there. The manager was true to his word. Chips, soft messages, sozes, whatever he had left, he gladly gave us. Even on the rare nights there was nothing left, he would still give us each a bottle to share out of his own pocket, and apologizing in the process. But in truth, he never had anything to apologize for. I don't think he even knew how much he was truly helping us. He never asked, never questioned, nor patronized us. He was kind and a good man, and I just like to stop the story to say, wherever you are thanked, you, I really am truly sorry I never got your name over time. My mom and Chris gradually got worse and worse, consuming more and more substances with one another, in turn spending more and more money we really didn't have. They were both unemployed, and any money supposed to look after us they certainly didn't use in that regard. It was at this time they both started to get even more aggressive and short-tempered, and this was when things got really scary. Chris became more physical with us and would force us and lock us in the room on my mother's command, or when he felt as though we had angered or disrespected him, when all we really did was play or speak too loudly. In his eyes this continued on and on for some time, until eventually things escalated dramatically. My mom and Chris started to fight more, but not just fight. They would scream, throw things, and it honestly sounded like a war zone down there. but thanks to the awful place we lived in and the horrible individuals who inhabited it, the police were never called, if I'm honest with myself, even if they were. I don't believe they would have, or could have done anything. My mom was as bad as she could be, but I doubt she would have cooperated with the authorities, even though Chris had physically harmed her several times. However, she did eventually stop seeing him, so much it was gradual, but eventually Chris had stopped showing up. Together, me and my brothers were delighted. We truly believed this could be a turning point, a fresh start. But how foolish were we? My mom went off the rails. She began spending all day and night partying in many different places with different men or night, and then she'd end up sleeping all day. She blew through money even faster now and eventually got into debt. As you can imagine, we began to be locked back in the room more and more. It got to the point we eventually snapped and had enough. We all kicked and eventually kicked the door open and kicked the lock clean off. There was a moment of tense silence as we hoped that she and her, shall we say, guest for the evening didn't hear us, and to our absolute relief they didn't, or at least they didn't care enough to check. We decided that we would just stay in our rooms, but at least now we could use the bathroom and drink from the tappets. Still really sucked, but for us, it was just nice not to be confined to the room anymore. Fast forward a few weeks, and Chris is back. He's round again, and we all knew it was only because he was lending her money to pay off her debts and enable her to use again. But as kids, we could do nothing, only sigh and feel. Trapped, the partying, the lance in our room, it was all to our dismay. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, this time, it was only short-lived. With the constant partying came the constant arguments. It got really bad again, to the point my mom told Chris to leave, and after some kicking, scratching, and screaming along with several broken items, including the old box television and the microwave, he eventually did, but not before vowing to return to collect his money, and that you better have it, or her kids, us, would regret it. An empty threat. Right, wrong, Few days went by without incident, but then one morning, a Saturday as I recall, my mother received a call. It was Chris. He demanded his money back and that he was coming over. She screamed at him that she didn't have it, but he told her in a sharp, loud tone she better get it, or else. Thankfully, my mom puts her phone on speaker, so we're all terrified, but at least we knew what was happening. I just remember my mom pausing for a minute and then softly said, "Okay, Chris, fine, come over, Callum will give it to you and upon." Hearing this, my blood ran cold. I didn't have his money. I didn't have any money, not a penny. What could I do? She then abruptly hung up. She crouched down slightly to be eye level with me, and in a matter of fact simply told me that Chris is coming over, and as he had a key he'd let himself in. Just please tell him I didn't have his money, but I was ironing earlier, and as it was hot, decided to iron in the garden, and I had the money on the ironing board to keep it safe, but a big gust of wind came and blew it away. I tried to chase it, but I couldn't find any of it, and so that we're sorry. So please just tell him that is what she asked me. And then she left us all alone with an angry addict coming over, an angry addict who wanted his money and wanted it right now, and all that she had left to defend us with was this tall tale, this lie so absurd and poorly constructed. Me and my brothers couldn't even believe it. Several minutes went by and me and my brothers just huddled in the front room, not knowing what to do. We were so terrified it honestly felt like time stood still. It felt as if we were just standing there waiting for something to happen for hours. But truthfully, it couldn't have. Been more than 10 minutes suddenly. The front door flung open forcefully, and we all instantly knew it was Chris. He barged into the room and demanded to know where our mother was hiding and where his money was. This guy was terrifying, big, angry, and he honestly looked wild. He was sweating profusely, his eyes wide, and he looked furious. He truly looked insane, like he wanted to hurt us, my brothers, and I just stood there frozen in fear. I looked at them, and in my role as their big brother, even though I was just as scared and just as powerless, I knew I had to speak up. I had to do something, or at least try. So I told him that she wasn't here, and we don't know where she is. He just scoffed and said, typical hiding things as usual. That's what your mother is, a coward and a thief. We didn't answer, and he didn't like that. He walked closer to us and got into my face and said, forget your mom, where's my money? His breath was rotten, and up close I could see how red and bloodshot his eyes were. He looked possessed. His eyes were a mixture of dilated pupil and bloody eyes that looked demonic. His eyes only shook me further, and as a result, I struggled to answer. I don't know. I finally managed to blurt out, none of us do. He snarled, called me a liar, and demanded that I tell him and that my mom better have his money, so I better talk now or else. I really don't. I begged him. I just wanted him to leave. I just wanted me and my brothers to be safe. But of course, he didn't believe me. He inched closer to me and spat in my face. I was at the brink of tears at this point, and my brothers just looked in. Horror frozen in place, tears forming in their eyes. I really don't know. My mom said she lost it while whining in the wind. I replied, stupid. I know, but I was scared and desperate, and at the same time, it's all my mouth could form. He really didn't like that. He grabbed me by the shirt and lifted me off the ground. Do you think that's funny? Am I joking to you? He screeched into my face. I couldn't even bring myself to answer or look at him. I was just so scared. I just wanted this to be a bad dream and for it all to be over. I wanted him to go away and leave us alone. Look at me. Am I jock? He screamed, no, I'm sorry. I don't know where the money is. I don't know where my mom is. I don't know anything. Please just let me go. No, but mark my words, if I don't get my money, I'll be back, and I'll end you. I'll end your brothers. I'll end your mom. I'll end you, all of me, and my kids will dance on your grave. And with that, he left. No violence, no termination, just 3 terrified kids. I know to other stories this might seem relatively tame, but it shook me to my very core. It traumatized me for quite some time. To be honest, my mom will return home some days later without explanation or even the smallest hint of interest or concern as to what transpired while she was away. All that, despite the fact she had in my eyes and my brothers left us for dead. That may be dramatic, but she left these young children to defend off a clearly very unstable addict, and for that I cannot forgive her. Me and my brothers went to live with my aunt after this, and thankfully we began to see her less and less. She actually ended up getting back with Chris. I don't know, typical, right? You can believe that. So that whole terrifying ordeal ended up being for absolutely nothing. Thanks, Mom. So although I don't hate you, please, Mom and Chris, let's never ever meet again. I'm a 22-year-old female and used to do DoorDash on the side for some extra cash. This was in the summer of 2018, when it was a little bit newer, at least in my town. Since then, I think they've made a lot of changes, but at the time, it was a little unorganized. If you don't know what DoorDash is, it's like a food delivery service typically for restaurants that don't deliver. Think McDonald's anyway. The one night I was doing deliveries all day, I decided to do my last delivery at around 10 o'clock. So I get an order in, and the person wants a medium-sized cheese and pepperoni pizza. And loaded potato wedges from a pizzeria nearby. I was kind of wondering why. They'd ordered from a pizzeria that delivers, but I figured it's because the place was notorious for taking forever when you order for delivery. I accepted the order and headed to said pizzeria. I got there and picked up the pizza, confirmed on the app that I had picked everything up and was on my way. The app notified me of the special instructions on the customer's form, which asked for me to call them when I was outside. Okay, then nothing unusual. There are lots of people ask that so that they can come out to get it from me. I get to their address, and it's in downtown. It's a larger apartment building, and it's completely pitch black. I instantly get an eerie feeling. So I pull to the curb, stay in the car. Hell no, was I about to go near that building and call the number. Luckily, DoorDash has this thing that hides your actual phone number. It rings a few times, and then this creepy woman's voice comes on the line and says we can't get to the phone right now. We're a little tied up, and then creepily giggles. Meanwhile, the entire time in the background, there's another woman screaming, and I mean screaming for help and for her life. It even got louder, as if the creepy woman was purposefully putting the screaming woman on the phone. He instantly hung up and drove off really quick, not even acknowledging which direction to go to. Luckily, there was a super popular restaurant a few blocks away, and I pulled into that parking lot and pulled up the app. I was worried about getting in trouble for not being able to deliver the order, so I contacted DoorDash Help Center, and they told me I had to wait 15 minutes to see if they'd call me or message me about their food. Well, they never did. I'm sitting there in the parking lot of the restaurant telling my mom about it, and we agree it's probably just a prank, and just in case it isn't, I should call the police. So I call the non-emergency number and tell them anything. The police tell me they're going to do a wellness check and actually thank me for calling them to tell them about it. I went home and nothing ever came of it, but I still think about it from time to time. I did get a free pizza and potato. Geez, so I thought that was cool. I really hope it was, or some kind of harmless prank. B. The house I was born in and grew up in was built in 1912, and at least one person had died there. There was a cruel space that went from the back of my closet, where there was a hole about 3x3 feet, maybe 4, just enough to literally crawl through, that went to the back of 2 closets in the master bedroom. Those entrances had actual panels that went to the crew space. We never went in there, partially because there was no need, and mostly because I was a kid, and it scared the crap out of me when in my teenage years we were redoing the insulation in our attic. The only entrance to the attic at the time was a tiny square panel in the ceiling of one of the upstairs rooms. We were also going to build one of those pull-down ladder things during this project. The attic always scared the hell out of me, cause sometime when we were kids, we would wake up and the panel would be slightly shifted and pushed in, but not fully covering the hole. But we figured it was our dad messing with us anyway. The attic was unfinished, so we're laying on boards on the cross beams, since you could hypothetically fall through the attic if you stepped poorly. I noticed that the attic goes back way further than I thought. I keep going with this terrible flashlight and see it actually. Drops down at one point to an area to the first floor, but I see that it's connected to the Godam crew space, which is kind of weird, but whatever, I keep going, and it drops down to this large area I would later realize is the roof of our porch. It was like a tiny room, but the floor was sketchy like the rest. There was a creepy wooden children's chair standing up in this room. There was also a bow piece of wood about a half in thick in the room, the area of a rectangular sheet of paper. There were names carved into the board, one each. Corner, top, bottom, left, right, the one in the middle, and two randomly in between. The weird part is that the one in the middle was carved deeper than any of the others, then gone over in some kind of red ink. The weird part was that the name was scratched up, like someone had gone at it with a knife in anger. The weirdest part is that it was my name, and my name has a semi-unique spelling, but I wouldn't say it's extremely uncommon. I've met a couple of people who spelled my name the way they spelled it, but still it was very weird that I didn't really think about it at the time. We redid the roof of the porch shortly after and pulled the chair and boards out. At the time, I just dropped it and got the hell out of there. Last time I shared this story, people said a picture would have been great. I did get curious and thought I might have stashed it in the basement or something, but I asked my brother, as he still lives in the house, and he says that we tossed it with the rest of the stuff we found there years ago. I was a pretty difficult teenage girl for my parents to manage around the age of 15. I was at the peak of this behavior. I was drinking with my friends every weekend, sneaking out of the house in the middle of the night, exploring the world of boys and just getting up to no good. My grandma passed away when I was young, around the age of 9. She was my only grandparent, and we shared a really special bond. She had dozens of grandchildren that openly favored me. She was eventually diagnosed with dementia, and towards the end, she would call everyone by my name, even her own children. One night, when I was 16, I snuck out of the house to visit my boyfriend. This wasn't an unusual occurrence. I did this pretty regular and had it down to a fine art. However, the only difference this time was that I needed to walk a few streets over and get a taxi because he wasn't able to pick me up. I stuffed some pillows under the quilt, put my hair extensions at the top to make it look like I was still in bed. If my parents ever checked on me, then I opened the window and started walking to where I planned for a cab to meet me. It was always an anxiety-inducing experience, but for some reason I was feeling really off about that night. I sold you on. I'd only walked a few streets away from my house when I saw my mom was calling me. I panicked and started sprinting home, apologizing profusely to my mom on the phone as I was running. When I got back to the house, my mom was waiting outside. She was so shaken and was crying a lot. I felt so horrible. She said she had a dream that my grandma, her mother, walked into her room and prompted her to wake up and check on me. Mom said she jolted awake and went straight to my bedroom to find my pillows and extensions and the window slightly ajar. This experience really pulled me in line, and my relationship with my parents is wonderful now. They'd always had stuck with me and my mom. I often wonder what might have happened if Mom hadn't have had that dream. I imagine things would have been very different. I used to be a supervisor for a janitorial company, and a couple of times a week I had to go to a middle school and clean their hallway floors and gymnasium with a Zamboni-type vehicle that mopped and scrubbed the floors. When I was there, I had the whole school to myself. I used to get finished quickly and go to the library and read while eating my dinner. But one morning, after being there, I get a call from the school security. They want me to come in. When I get there, I see a police car. Oh, I think they asked me a few questions like, did I notice anything of the ordinary or strange while I was there last night? No, I hadn't. Usually I have headphones, and so security then shows me camera footage of someone breaking into one of the classrooms. While I was riding the Zamboni not far away, I was there for another 2 hours. Nothing was stolen, but the worst part was they didn't have footage of the person leaving. They didn't go out the way they came in, and the police had to sweep the entire school. Never did find out what happened with this one. This happened a good 20 plus years ago, and I had forgotten about it until today. I think it's a good reminder that sometimes the most unexpected things can happen. When you least expected, this event really made me feel like I couldn't be safe anywhere, and caused me to be hypervigilant every time I left my house, and that feeling stayed with me for a long time afterwards. It was winter time, about 11 in the morning, and I was standing at a bus stop. This bus was in a mini mall where there was a bigger department store, a dollar store, and another little shop. I was going to catch the bus to my brand new job, and that day was going to be my very first day at the new shop, so I was excited and nervous, and definitely wanted to make a good impression. While I waited for the bus, I realized I was a good 15 minutes early, and also had forgotten my gloves, and it was bitterly cold. My hands were freezing, but I only had a few dollars on me, so I figured it would be cheapest to buy new gloves at the dollar store. When I went in, it was quite big, but there were no other people in there yet, besides the old Asian man behind the front counter. He gave me a big smile and came around the corner to stand next to me. I asked him where their gloves were located, and he said, "I'll show you." As soon as he said this, he laughingly grabs my left hand with his right one and starts bringing it towards the back of the store. The back of the store had a display table with some things on it, toys I think, and on the wall behind it was a section with winter items, and just to the right of that a door that said employees only. Everything happened really fast when he grabbed my hand and started bringing me towards the back. I kind of awkwardly laughed because he was laughing, and I just thought he was an overly friendly guy who was trying to be helpful. I had also been in this store a few times before, and both times the same guy was there, but he was ringing people up, and he was always happy and smiley and laughy with every customer who he interacted with. I never got any weird vibes from him or any other time I was there. So just as we got to the back, out of nowhere, the hand holding mine clamps around my wrist really hard. His other hand reaches over and grabs my chest ridiculously hard, twists it, and starts pushing me towards the employee-only door. I could not believe how fast everything changed. I'm so happy I had worn my thick boots that day, because the only thing I could do was kick him in the shin and try to pull away from him. He went back and forth with me, trying to get away from him, while he tried to get a hold of my arm tighter, and while also trying to push me towards the door, while I'm still trying to land kicks. All in this, he lost his balance and fell into the display table, and then I was able to get my arm away, and I just took off running as fast as I could. I ran to the back of the next store, and they had a customer service department where there were other people and there were phones, so to try and wrap This up, I used the store's phone to call my mom because I didn't know why I was so confused and wondered if I should. Call the cops. I was trying to figure out what just happened while also realizing that I missed the bus and was going to mess up the first day of my new job. Well, I did call the cops though. After I got off the phone with my mom who came to get me, the way I looked at it was like, okay, I was already all right. But what if I hadn't gotten lucky? What if this guy does something to someone else and they don't get away? What if something even worse could happen to someone else? Or already did this happen in broad daylight on a weekday morning? So it could happen to anyone. They arrested him, and we had to go down to the station to give a statement about. A week later, there's an article in the newspaper that they've arrested 5 people that own the dollar store because they had apparently been setting up these dollar stores for a few weeks as a front for some shady activity, and then they would close it down, wait a month or 2, and go to a different county to open another one, like I said in the beginning. Of this messed with me for quite a while. After that, I don't feel safe when I leave my house. I just wanted to buy a pair of gloves, so creep from the dollar store, let's never meet. Again, about 30 years ago, I used to work for a pizzeria in the small town in which I live. It's the kind of place where you know pretty much everyone who you bump into on your route, who you're delivering to anyway. We were understaffed that day. I was also answering the phones while I was waiting for my replacement, as technically I was the delivery driver. This wasn't an uncommon thing I had to do, as we were always incredible understaffed. It was an independent, low-budget pizzeria, and the guy was stingy as hell when it came to working. I get this call, and it's an old lady we hadn't heard from her in absolutely ages, I'd say at least a year, but she sometimes ordered pizzas Hawaiian, so we get the order. However, there's something weird about this phone call. She doesn't say hello or anything like she usually would. When the phone answers, she's just saying she'd like a Hawaiian pizza, and then hangs up the phone. She didn't even say where to. Again, small town. I guess she either assumed we knew who she was and where she lived. Well, I think that's the only reason really. In any case, we know who she's on our system. We double check, make the pizza, and about 20 minutes later, when my replacement arrives, I can finally start making my way. This old lady lived a bit out in the sticks. It's a small town, so the sticks aren't exactly far. And after 10 minutes do I reach a little room, the middle of basically nowhere. All the lights were off when I first approached the house, which gave me a very weird vibe and made me feel quite unsettled. I grabbed my flashlight and peeked out and flashed it towards the door, seeing if there was a paper note or anything saying she'd be right back, but there was no such thing. I hesitantly stepped out, grabbed the pizza from the back seat, and started making my way towards the door. I knocked a few times on the door and waited, tapping my feet, expecting her to answer the door any moment now. Keeping in mind her age and the fact she might be delayed, I remember it was cold as I was standing out there, the only warmth coming from the pizza on top of my hands. I waited for about 2 to 3 minutes. Growing ever more bored, that's when I decided to knock again. I knocked firmly and said hello. It's the pizza. I waited 2 more minutes. I was starting to get annoyed, so I started looking around the house to see if perhaps she hadn't heard. Mia was in another room. I looked with my flashlight just to double check. This was starting to get weird, just at the point where I thought perhaps I should go back. Did it strike Me that I should go around the house and check the garden or something, perhaps in some bizarre turn of events she walked outside and got locked out. It wasn't a gate or anything, so being sort of hesitant still, I opted to walk around and just double check for her safety too. I reached the back of her house, and she's got these big glass windows that are basically the size of a door that look out into her garden. Just as I turn on my flashlight to look inside, do I see a sight I'll never forget. The woman is lying on the floor. I panic, I freak out, I grab my phone and start dialing, trying to get in contact with my manager, only then does. At least a few days by their reckoning, it was very, very cold in the house. And winter, so at least her body hadn't entered a big state of decay. But the real question on my mind is, how could a dead body order a pizza?